You're very compassionate. The welcoming that I received when I came here, I hadn't received it anywhere else before. So that in itself showed me that you were already set apart in that. So if you continue in that vein, I think you're doing the right thing. And as you said, if you know the right thing and you do it, then you're okay. But if you know the right thing and you do the opposite, I think whether you were a Seventh-day Adventist or whether you were a Muslim or whether you were an Anglican, you will be in the same boat in, in not doing the right thing. And having said that, when I was listening to you all, and I was also thinking of myself being of a different denomination, what did come to me was something that it says, trust in God. He would not let you down. He is the Lord. But most importantly, lean not to your own understanding. So trust in the word of God. So whenever I'm trying to have my scientific mind, trying to lean to my own understanding, I remember that, and that sets me back on the right track. Okay. Today I am here to talk to you about stress and worry, and Sister Florence had already introduced this so eloquently. And I think, Sister Florence, you should be somebody who actually is a mental health advocate from the way how you've introduced this. As she mentioned, this week, from the 15th to the 21st, is Mental Health Awareness Week. Mental health is something that we do not speak of openly in our communities because there is stigma attached to it. We think it's a weakness. Some people think it's a spiritual attack. We think it's various things. Will come and say, oh, what's happened to you? How are you doing? Are you okay? Can I help you out? And so on. But if someone's having a mental health struggle, we don't find it quite as easy to reach out to them and to support them in the same way. And that's not our fault. It's not because we're totally not compatible, but because we don't understand it quite as well. It's not as in your face as a broken arm or a broken leg or something is. So we try to get a better understanding of it before we can be sympathetic towards people. And sometimes we think people with mental health problems are malingerers, or it can't happen to me, can't happen to my family member, it can't happen to someone I know. But as Sister Florence says, it can happen to someone you know, it can happen to you, it can happen to me. It's probably happened to some of us, it's probably happened to people that you do know. And I trust that you have responded to them effectively, because actually the statistics tell us there's 1 in 4 people struggle with a mental health problem. And these are mental health conditions that can be diagnosed, not simply something that we say, oh, that person's cracked up, that person's cray-cray, because these are words that we use flippantly to describe mental health people. But actually 1 in 4 people. So how many of us in this room, at least one of us has had a mental health struggle in 4? So just look around and think, might it be that, you might have had anxiety, some stress, some worry, some depression. It might even be something more serious, like a mood disorder. But we're all still people of God. Yeah? And God does make mistakes. So, we're going to talk about anxiety mainly, but we're relating it to stress and worry, especially in the context of what we've been through over the past 3 years because of, the coronavirus pandemic, which has actually disproportionately affected ethnic minority communities, and Brent has had the highest number of death rates in the country, actually, and in particular 2 areas. The reason I started my work was because of Church End and Alperton. These were the 2 wards in Brent that had the highest numbers of death in the whole of Brent. And that's why we had to start working here. And why did that happen? That happened because of inequalities. That happened because people in Brent, as you might see on the streets, people have difficulties. People have poor housing, poor health, poor understanding of our health needs and conditions and how to respond to them. So if I live in a multi-generational, multiple occupancy accommodation at the time when COVID hit, or if I have, as black people are predisposed to have physical health conditions, then I was at a higher risk of catching the coronavirus and having a more adverse effect of it on me because my immune system was already lowered, as opposed to somebody who lived in a nicer area. So if I lived in Churchend or Alperton, I was at an increased risk as opposed to someone who lived in Brondesbury or someone who lived in Kenton, because those, if we look at, someone said we tend to look at statistics, but statistics are helpful because that shows us that there are some areas in Bren that are more deprived, that has less services than other places in Bren. Therefore, the people who live in those areas are more at risk of adverse after effects of COVID, diabetes, hypertension, heart disease, cancers, or people who don't usually seek help. We tend to try to look after ourselves by ourselves, use our own natural remedies because we don't trust the medicines. Therefore, we seek help when things are at a later stage rather than at an early stage where you could intervene earlier and perhaps have better outcomes for that. So because of the impact of COVID, there is a lot of anxiety, there is a lot of stress, there is a lot of worry. Since the cost of living crisis, again, the statistics tell us that 50% of the population, of the UK population, are worried about how they're going to pay their bills. And as Sister Florence said, out of the blue, you were hit with a £700 bill. How am I going to pay that? And as she mentioned about the lady who had to leave her accommodation, I took an Uber the other day. Very rarely do you get a female Uber driver. But when I got one and we were talking, turns out she was from Brazil. And we were just generally talking. And I asked her why she started Uber driving. She had a different job. And she said, because I was able to make money quicker driving an Uber. And she also said, I actually used to live in the area where you live here. I lived on the next road from you when she picked me up. And she said, but I couldn't afford it anymore. I was paying over £1,000 for rent for a 2-bedroom flat for myself and my daughter. But the landlord was also struggling, as Sister Florence said, and the landlord knew that. As I was an old tenant, he couldn't increase my rent. It would be illegal. However, getting a new tenant, he could do that because that would be a fresh start, a fresh tenancy agreement. He could increase the rent. So the landlord said to me, I'm sorry, you'll have to leave. And she had to leave the local area in Kensal Rise and go all the way to North London, somewhere in Highgate, before she could afford another 2-bedroom flat for herself and her daughter. The impact of that was that she's taken away from the friends, the network that she had. As you may be aware, there's a large Brazilian community now in the local area from the Harrow Road into Harlesden and around here. So she had to leave all these friends behind. Similar to the lady who had to go to Huddersfield, leave all your friends behind. I remember some years ago when I was looking for a larger place, I was asked by my local authority to go to Southampton. I said, I know no one in Southampton. I'm already in a foreign land, having come here at a very young age from Uganda, and now you want to put me somewhere where I don't know anyone, for me to start all over again, where my family are all here locally. We're already resettled here. So I decided to stay in a smaller place and not go all the way to Southampton. It might have opened up different opportunities for me, but at the time I wasn't looking at it. So these are real impact of the coronavirus, of the cost of living crisis, which is causing stress and worry and anxiety. And so I said to this lady, how do you deal with this? How do you cope with that? And she said, actually, I've got my Bible in the car. I'm a Christian. So when the stress is overwhelming, I'll stop the car and I'll pray. And God has never let me down. Yeah? So that is one coping mechanism that people use. Other people have someone to talk to. But we also know that during COVID, you weren't able to meet here together and fellowship with each other because we were separated, and some people don't have a family unit in their own home, and people are isolated, and people struggled with loneliness and isolation. And when we've looked recently, we know that loneliness and isolation actually kills people. You know, we might not think so, but it does. Because people will say someone's died of a heart attack, but their heart's broken because they haven't been able to connect with people as they used to. That's because they're lonely, they're isolated. Maybe coming to church, you're the only person who will say hello to them. And I remember a few years ago, there was a group of ladies in East London, and they would go to church on a Sunday, and they would prefer for the priest to lay hands on them rather than to take the sacrament. And he plucked up the courage and asked one of them, said, "Why do you not take the sacrament? There is no one that I think should take it more than you." And they said, "You're the only person that touches us. No one hugs us. No one lays hands on us. So we would rather have someone lay their hands on us than to take the sacrament." How powerful is that? Because human beings, we are social animals. Even from the day of creation, we need to be with other people in order for us to flourish. So when you're locked down, when you're lonely, when you're isolated, you're left with your thoughts alone. And your thoughts can play havoc with you. Yeah? They can tell you all those things that you're thinking about yourself, all those doubts that you wouldn't have if you were amongst other people. And you sit there and you ruminate, and that will not be good for you. Yeah, so socialization is a very important way for human beings to exist. So I'll go back to why I'm here. I've told you the statistics of how many people struggle with mental health. And mental health is part of our general health and well-being. It's about our emotional, our psychological, and our social well-being, as I said. And people experience different types of different mental health problems at different times. And these problems can affect how I think. It can affect my mood. It can affect how I behave. So you might say, "Oh, Sister Jenny doesn't seem to be in a good mood today. She doesn't seem to be herself." Or I might begin to think that, Sister here doesn't like me. It might not be true. But because of my mental health, I'll begin to think that way. I'll begin to think that, I shouldn't eat what someone's giving me. They might put something in it. Even a trusted person like your mother, like your sister, like your husband, you begin to distrust them and suspect them and worry about them. That's because your mental health is struggling. It affects how you relate with people here at church. It affects how you relate with people at work. It affects how you relate with people on the street. I had an encounter recently where someone out of the blue was triggered and began to just rant and shout and said regrettable things, and she was being told, "Okay, you said your piece, stop now. You might regret this if you continued." But she didn't stop. We don't know what she's been going through, what's triggered her, but what we know is that what she said was, for the person we thought she was out of character. And all we could say is, we don't think she's in a very good place right now. So let's leave it for a bit. If she goes away and reflects and wants to come back and say, "I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said what I said. That was really out of character. I might have been going through this." That's fine. You can think about, forgiving and moving on. And Sister Florence, you mentioned about talking about, resentment and so on. Because resentment, and that can also eat away at you. So for me, although she said certain things to me and about me, I decided to open my heart and let it go, because I didn't want it to occupy me and prevent me from going on and being normal. And someone said, when you do things like that, you allow someone to live in your head rent-free. And I don't want that. Life's hard enough as it is. Yeah. So my coping strategy is to forgive, move on. Doesn't mean that I've forgotten, because I don't think I'm going to allow that to happen again next time. I'm going to stop that before it goes to the level that it did. But I've let it go this time. Yeah. And so, some of the mental health conditions that we feel are common are things like anxiety and depression. And usually around 1 in 6 people will suffer with anxiety or depression. So again, 1 in 6 of us in this room might struggle with anxiety or depression. 10% of women usually suffer with depression and anxiety, as opposed to 5% of men is what we found. We don't know why that is the case, but we think men are probably a little bit more easygoing. They don't worry as much as women do. And I remember even my young son, a few years ago, when I was fretting, said to me, Mum, be more like a man. You worry too much. You know? So we do the worrying for ourselves, for the family, and for our husbands and our men folk as well. There are more men in the streets. As you said, you see more homeless men. Yeah, you see more homeless men. More men seem to be like... Yeah, so I'll come to that. Potentially, because there is a lot of pressure on men as the breadwinners, as the protectors. You know, society puts a lot of pressure on men to be something that maybe you're not. And if you then feel that you're not, or society judges you as inadequate and unable to provide for your family, unable to have that job, unable to have that car, that house, and so on, what happens? That stress will build up. We also know that men don't talk about their feelings as women do. Therefore, they take that on themselves. They take that on the inside. And as I was saying, you're alone with your thought, that self-doubt, what people are already telling you, plus what you're also telling yourself. And that is some of the end result in the end. And they'll say they may use alcohol or they may use drugs as a coping strategy. They think that might relieve you. But actually it doesn't, because addiction is also another problem in itself, which then leads to all of the other social issues that might ensue, such as homelessness, criminal activity, and men also die by suicide more than women, especially men of working age, because again, they don't have an outlet. They don't talk about their feelings because they've been told for many, many years, you're a man, be strong, come on, man up. You know, don't be like that. Go out there and work. Even from the days of Adam, did they not have to go to the fields and work? Yeah. Yes. So men have had that pressure on them from day dot. And therefore, when you don't meet that standard that is expected of you, it's very difficult to then be a part of society, to be respected, to be accepted. And these are then why you find some people are on the margins of this society. And one of the things that this church I know does very well is you're bringing people back from the margins of society. You see that there is a need and you act. That is what is called compassion. Compassion is seeing that somebody's in need and wanting to do something to help. It's as simple as that. This is a very compassionate place. And that's why you have the winter night shelter. This is why Brother Rohan has his ministry. This is why you have the food bank. And also, if we talk about the cost of living, I'm sure you've seen the queues, you know, of your food bank rise. Some food banks are being closed. Those people are coming to you now because you're still open. Some have. Yeah, some have. Because they also found themselves unable to continue for various reasons. One very big one was about to close, and we collect for that food bank in my church. And they said, we just can't, continue the operation of this food bank anymore. And people said, okay, hold fire and see, trust in God, see what might come up. And something did come up, and they are still continuing, but I do know that some have closed. So because of the global, impacts of the pandemic and other problems, mental health problems are on the rise. And recently, the Mental Health Foundation have found that, 34% of adults in the UK feel anxious, 29% felt stressed, 10% felt hopeless about their financial circumstances. And as I said before, 70% of people were thinking, how can I maintain my current living standard? 66% are saying, how can I continue to pay my household bills? How can I hit my home? Was one of the things that people were saying. And if we think about it, even previously, before immediately after the pandemic, people were saying choosing to heat or eat, but it became a harsher reality. Now we all can see that. You go to the supermarket, you put a few things in the basket, it's already £40, it's already £50. That's not what it used to be like. So it is really hitting us, and we can see it for real as it is. And things that people used to do, people now are struggling to sleep. 30% of people saying that they can't sleep as well as they used to, and 15% of people saying, we can't see our friends like we used to. We can't go out to dinner. We can't go out to for a drink. We can't do social activities that was good for our well-being because we just can't afford it, But we also know that some of these things that people do is good for your mental well-being, because if you don't go out and do that, then you're isolated at home thinking about those worries anyway, so your mental health is still going to struggle, So what is anxiety actually, if you want? So the definition, it's described as a normal, but it's an unpleasant emotion that you have, because you can feel worried, you can be nervous, it can make you feel uneasy. You can have extreme fear and terror and panic because of anxiety, Some level of anxiety is good for you because in prehistoric days, it was actually allowed you to be able to respond to danger. So that's where you hear the fight or flight phrase will come in. In those days, if you were going to be attacked by a wild animal, either you were frozen in fear or and stopped and fought in afterwards, or you fled. Sometimes you have to think, pick your battles. Can I stay here and fight, or should I just flee? So some anxiety and stress is good for you because it can save your life. Yeah, but if it's too much and it's constant, then it's not good for you. Like anything, if it's ongoing, like chronic pain or a bad situation, it's not good for you in the end if there's no end to it. Yeah. And sometimes, say I feel a bit anxious. I was feeling a bit anxious about this presentation, and here we are. You feel a bit anxious. I've got to take a driving test. I've got to take an exam, or I'm preparing for, a work interview or something. That kind of stress is called eustress. It can spur you on to go out and do your best, But then there is also the bad stress that just niggles away at you, won't let you sleep, won't let you think clearly, it just makes you jittery. That's not good stress. And what causes stress or anxiety? Because they're sort of interlinked, actually. And again, there are many reasons why, so you might just even be nervous about meeting new people. You're not a very sociable person, or having to stand here and talk to people. That might make you nervous and a bit worried and a bit stressed. Or maybe you have to meet a work deadline, you're a bit worried about that. Or you might have a physical health condition, as I mentioned, like long-term condition like pain or, diabetes. These are kind of conditions that make you feel a bit low because they're constant. If you go to bed in pain and you wake up in pain, that's going to have an impact on you. If you've got a physical health condition, like some things make you quite demotivated. I was speaking to someone recently who says, I've had diabetes for 20 years. I'm not as motivated as I used to be able to do things. I can't wake up as early as I used to. So now I need to kind of get up around 12 o'clock and then, do things through the day. And then I'll sleep quite late because I just can't rise as early, because the medication that you take for diabetes can also be something that dampens you a little bit. In controlling the diabetes, it can also do that. So you can't be your sprightly self that you used to be anymore. So that can also have an impact on you. And some of the signs and symptoms of anxiety, we might feel it in various parts of our bodies, but they might be physical or they might be external. So for instance, if I saw a spider or something, oh my God, immediately I'll have that reaction if I'm afraid of bugs and spiders and so on. But it might also be internal. I might have palpitations, I might start to, sweat a little bit, be really worried, and all of that might be happening within my body. And, so I might, my heart might beat faster, might not sleep properly, feeling dizzy and shaky, having aches and pains that are really unrelated. It's much more in my mind than it is, but because we can only interpret things sometimes as a body pain rather than as a mental pain, so we express it and we say, like I used to have a patient who used to say, I've got body pain, but really he was hearing voices. But that was because in his culture where he came from, there wasn't really a term for hearing voices and things like that. So he could only somatize it. He could only think that it was coming from within his body and express it that way. And there might be a change in your appetite. You might eat more. Some people will eat less. Some people will sleep too much, or some people will not sleep at all. people will be a little bit irritable with each other, with their family, at work. And as I said, someone said, well, that's unusual behavior for this person, just because they're so anxious, and then in the extreme cases, people might have like panic attacks. And these will be happening, in various parts of the body. So like I said, your heart, your legs, your knees, you might need to go to the toilet a bit more. Your tummy might rumble, and that's why people say, I've got butterflies in my tummy. Those are all kind of signs of anxiety. They express in that way. And usually when we work with people who struggle that, we ask them to identify what are the different triggers. When that kind of feeling starts to happen, what situation are you in? What's going on? Make a note. So, identify your stressors. And recently, something that we've got when we've been doing some mental health training is something like this. This says, so we give this to people and say, identify what your stressors and your triggers are. So could it be something like a life change? It might be, you've left home, getting married, having children, a divorce, a relationship breakdown. It might be illness, or a scare, an accident, a bereavement, legal issues, things like that. Or it might be emotional, are there some things that I'm struggling with, I'm coping with uncertainty, there's a conflict, there's cultural values and beliefs, and we might even see that within the church. Someone mentioned earlier on that we might lose our young people because they're struggling with that as well. There's an intergenerational thing happening. The older generation believe this, and this is how it should happen. But as I say, younger people are now exposed to social media, what they might see on YouTube, what they might read. They might have an influencer that is telling them a different view of what, parents and grandparents have been telling them. And so that kind of conflict can cause a lot of stress and anxiety, It might be something environmental. Your housing situation is not good. You're living with mold, you're living with damp, you're needing to pay rent and so on. Those are stressors. Everyday kind of life changing, unemployment, being isolated. So all of those things that we've spoken about. So you identify, what is my source of stress? What is my source of anxiety and worry? And then you begin to deal with it there. Because if you don't know, you can't do anything about it. So you first kind of take stock. What's going on? What is the main stressor here? And then how can I begin to deal with it? Is it something that I can deal with by myself? Can I reach out to a sister? Can I reach out to a brother? Do I need to talk to a pastor? Do I need to see my GP? Who is the best person who's going to be able to support me with this? Because sometimes we do advocate self-management, but we also have to think about, do we have a limit? Sometimes we're no longer able to do it by ourselves, and that's where there's other people that we can reach out to support us. And then once you make that plan and you begin to do it. And if you were to reach out professionally, then there are treatment options. There's something called cognitive behavior therapy, which we use in talking therapies. So this is it helps you to begin to look at how your thoughts and your feelings and emotions and behaviors, they're all linked and they all have an impact on each other. So it will focus, say, what is the problem today? So the problem is money. I'm worried about how I'm going to pay my rent. Okay, what am I going to do? So I'm going to look at my expenditure, write down how much money I've got. What can I spend on? If I go out and buy new shoes, is my rent going to be short? So it's just really simple strategies like that. Consolidate and do that. And you do that, you will get some relief. If you don't do that, if I go and buy 2 pairs of shoes instead and I don't pay the rent, then where am I going to keep these shoes if I get kicked out? So it's like kind of having that reality with myself. So cognitive behavior therapy uses practical strategies, as I say, and it helps you to make changes. And then those changes are positive and realistic, and you can achieve them, and you build strategies, and then you begin to use those, and then you achieve your goals. There's also usually alongside that, there's medication that you can be given to, some anxiolytics, which your GP can give you. And that's usually in the acute phase to perhaps kind of just calm things down, help you engage with the therapy. Some people might need medication longer term. Some people might not need medication longer term. It might well be that the situation that you encountered was so acute that you needed some medication. But now that you're having some talking therapy, you don't need that anymore. So that's usually just reviewed with yourself and your doctor. So, we've talked about stress and anxiety and how they're interlinked and how the reactions are kind of, quite similar. But what we found more recently also is that there's work-related stress. So as I said, deadlines, changes in jobs, maybe we need to, there's staff been cut and so on. You're having to do a lot more than it used to be before. That can cause you a lot of stress, but your manager still wants you to meet that deadline. What do I do? Again, the same kind of coping strategies. You consolidate and you just see, what am I able to do so that this stress kind of doesn't, become overwhelming. And there was a recent survey, again, where it says that 79% of employees experience work-related stress. That's a lot of people that are out there. They're working, but they're very, very stressed. Luckily, some organizations, such as mine now, we have well-being support in place so that people can be referred to your occupational health department, or there might be a counselor, there might be, a health and well-being champion somewhere that you can go and talk about, what is affecting you. And we have well-being plans now that we can draw up with our staff and just say, okay, you told me in supervision that you're struggling with this. Let's think about how, we can support you. But again, stress will present quite similar to anxiety with the fast heart rates, but this time around there might be raised blood pressure. People, again, will speak of headaches and back pain and jaw ache and tightness in your shoulders. And that's why sometimes I say, I've got a lot of tension on my shoulder. You get a bit of a massage and you feel it. That's, due to stress. It might be due to your mattress as well. But, it's usually stress. And again, feeling irritable, eating too much, too little. And memory problems. People begin to forget because you're thinking too much. And so your memory's been affected. And again, your sleep is also affected. And some of the ways that, we advise people is how, to kind of think about reducing your stress again is make a plan. And if you made a plan, then you have a strategy of how you can manage your stress. Be positive, have a positive mindset. A lot of people say their faith helps them. Use that. If you've got a negative outlook on life, it's just going to get you more and more down. It's not going to lift you up. If you're somebody who's going to think, oh, why me? No one likes me, I can't do anything right. If you think that way, then you're not going to be able to do anything right because you're just going to spend your time ruminating. Whereas if you think, okay, this has happened to me, fine, it's already happened, there's nothing I can do about that, but I can change what can happen to me next. I can make a plan, I can think of how I can do things, be positive, believe in yourself, and you begin to see things that change. If you've got a positive attitude, do something, go out, smile at someone, go for a walk, join a club, a hobby, do Bible studies, be positive, do something, try and relax. It's very difficult when you're stressed and you're anxious to relax, but try to stay in the moment rather than, thinking way ahead of what could happen, which is probably not going to happen anyway. So come back to the present moment, what's going on here, let me deal with the situation that I'm dealing with now and try and resolve it rather than worrying about something that might not happen. And as I said, talk to someone. Or if you're somebody who is creative, create some art, design something, make an outfit or something like that. Bake, cook, do something creative and you begin to see a difference. What about worry? Again, worry is quite similar to stress and anxiety. It's also about the way how you think about problems and, what might happen. You begin to be anxious and apprehensive. And worrying is a normal process as well. But for some people, it can become a problem itself because you're worrying too much and this will interfere with your ability to do other things, to be around people, to work, to study. And your worries will jump around. As I said, you worry about one thing and then you start to worry about the next and you can never focus on the worry. So there's just too many worries happening and you go into this vicious circle of worrying. So what we normally say is that you should try to contain those worries and actually identify. Some of these worries are uncertain, about uncertain things that I don't know, For instance, I might be worrying and saying, my health. Is my health going to be okay in the future? I don't know. Anything can happen to me. Do I need to worry about that now? It's good to be aware and to think about, keeping healthy, eating healthy, exercising, because those are normal things. But if I begin to worry and say, I'm going to have, a serious illness in the future, but I don't know that. And that can then make you worry and begin to check your body continuously, call the GP often because you're worried about certain health condition that might not happen. Then you're constantly asking other people, do you think I'm all right? Do you think something's going to happen to me? But actually, it's uncertain. You don't know about it. Or things can be unpredictable, worrying, and so it will stop you enjoying what's happening in the present. And some worries are uncontrollable. You don't have control over it anyway. There's nothing you can really do about it, even if you're worrying about it. So, you might worry that, as I mentioned before, no one likes me. If I'm walking down the road, people might not smile at me, or that's life. Not everybody will smile at you. Someone will smile at you, though. Just keep doing it. Just be yourself. Just be positive. Don't let the situation and the environment change you. Yeah. But we have something about, in terms of containing your worries, like we say, okay, if the worry is getting too much, make a plan with yourself. Say, I'm going to make an appointment at 8 o'clock tonight. For 20 to 30 minutes, I'm going to allow myself to worry. It sounds funny, doesn't it? Like you're making an appointment to worry. But I'm going to make an appointment. I'm going to worry as much as possible for 30 minutes only, and then I'm going to stop. I'm going to pack that worry away. I'm going to say, wait for the next time. We'll do this again tomorrow evening, and then get on with your life. And the idea is that the more you do that, you get into the habit of it, your worries will reduce. You might find that you had to worry for 30 minutes. Now you're worrying for 20 minutes, and 15 minutes, and 10 minutes, and you're containing that worry. And it is reducing because you made a plan, and you've started acting on that plan, and now you're beating that worry because it's becoming less and less, and you're beginning to flourish, and it's not controlling your life anymore. You're able to take control of it and do those things that you enjoy, the things that make you feel good about yourself, because now worry is not controlling you. Yeah. And one of the way how you say about this is, okay, so I'm worrying about this. Is it something that, I can do something about now? Can I deal with this worry straight away? If you can, yes, go ahead and do it. No? Fine, write it down. I'm worrying about my sister might be ill. Is there anything I can do about this now? No, not at the moment. I'll write it down. It's not because I'm dismissing it. I'm forgetting about it. I'll make an appointment with myself. I'll worry about that, and I'll make a plan of how to deal with it. And I'll be in a quiet room. I won't let anything distract me from this worry. I'm going to give this worry my full attention, and I'm going to deal with it. And then I'm going to move on. Yeah. So I mentioned earlier on about kind of the things that stop us from talking about mental health and addressing it. It's because there is a stigma attached to it. And the work of the Mental Health Foundation is to try and reduce that stigma, And so we have to talk about it because there's lots of myths and misconceptions about mental health problems. And one of the things that we talk about when, as I said, we think it's a spiritual attack, or we think you've done something wrong, it's karma, it's a generational curse, or something like that. That's why someone's got a mental health problem, or dangerousness, or we think all mental health patients are dangerous. And people ask me that. Aren't you worried about working in mental health? Isn't it dangerous? As opposed to, working in another area. And I'm saying, I've been doing this for about 20 years. I've been hit once, and that was a person who was in a very bad place. They were in a very deluded state, and they hit me once. And I walked down the road everywhere and say, Nurse Jenny, Nurse Jenny. Like, yes, hello. I was like, I'm still taking my medication. I was like, good. I was like, yeah, but don't tell the whole bus. Don't tell everyone, And people with mental health problems are not dangerous people. In fact, they are more at risk from other people. People think that they can sneer at them, they can hit them, they can, impinge on their human rights just because they've got mental health difficulties. They are more at risk than you and I are at risk. So, but that is a misconception because some incident might have happened and they'll say, the person had mental health, they had schizophrenia, so they killed somebody. But that's once in a blue moon. How many people are killing people or committing crimes against other people who don't have a mental health problem? It's not reported in the same way. It's not sensationalized to make you think that mental health patients are dangerous. Mental health patients are vulnerable people that need our care and support and our advocacy. They need our help. They need our prayer. If those who want ask for it, that they want it. It's not because we go and we impose that. And what we found more recently, that actually people want their faith involved in their mental health care, because they said, you don't consider my spiritual needs, you don't consider my cultural needs when you're planning my treatment and my care. But these are things that are good for me. When I'm not feeling so well, I go to my pastor first before I come to you. So that's an important person in my care that can support me. And actually, if somebody has got their faith group or somewhere that they can go, if they come out of the hospital, they don't need me as much because they've got somebody else who can support them and who doesn't pathologize that. That kind of reduces that stigma as well. And that's why we work with faith communities, make places of worship mental health friendly, so that you can continue to support your people back in the community. They can reintegrate back, even if they've had a period in hospital, in the same way how sometimes you reintegrate people back if maybe they've been in prison or somewhere like that, and still see them as a part of your community and still look after them the same way. And it may well be that sometimes, you can't be the only one who can look after them, but we give you tools to help you look after them. So we provide something called mental health first aid training, which is similar to physical first aid. So if you see someone in a physical health crisis, you're going to want to intervene, you're going to want to call an ambulance, you're going to want to put them in the recovery position. It's very similar, that if you see someone also struggling with their mental health, if you've got the tool, you can also intervene and you can say, Jenny, I've seen someone who I think is struggling with their mental health. I've talked to them, but I think they might need more support than what I can provide. That's because you've been equipped with that tool. I've given you that resource, I've given you that training, I've given you that number that you can call. You know who, the person to reach out to, and you can support this person. Or maybe even things that, it's still considered taboo around, because people do take their own lives. People don't want to talk about suicide. Even professionals, sometimes when we're doing assessments, we don't ask people if they're having suicidal thoughts, because there is a taboo around it. But also we think, oh, well, if I ask them, they might think about it more. But actually, that's a myth. Because people want you to ask them. They want to tell you, because they don't want this burden all on themselves. They don't want to be stuck with it. If they tell you, that's a bit of a release. But now you also know, and you know that they need a bit more support. And you're going to do something to support them. You're going to ask them when you see them, how are you doing now? How are things? Any improvement? Is there anything that I can help with? And when I do an assessment and I talk to people about, suicidal thoughts. And sometimes if I've got students or even like family members of people, they're a bit surprised when I ask them, okay, so you've told me you have suicidal thoughts. What stops you from taking your own life? And people are like, why would you ask that? I said, because I need to know. If you have something that stops you, even though you have this thought, that's a good thing. So people will say, my family, I couldn't do that to my family. My faith won't allow me. Or they'll say, what about my pet? Who's going to look after my pet if I'm not here? Those are things that we call protective factors. They've got something to live for. It is that person who cannot identify what stops them when this thought is overwhelming is the person that we've got to worry about. And more often than not, it's men of working age, because they're the ones who don't talk about it. They have a lot of struggles, but they don't talk about it. They don't tell you, and then they do it. Yeah. So I've got some resources which I will share with Pastor Mario, and he will share with you guys if you're interested, especially in the mental health first aid training. It's usually We give you 45 minutes of a taster of it to see if it's something that you would want to do. And then if you're interested, then it's a full 2-day course, and you're recertified every 3 years to do that. And then you can respond to anyone in a mental health crisis at any time, anywhere, because you're certified mental health first aider. You can do that, and you can help save a life. Yeah? Okay. And one of the things that I didn't mention was that, kind of the link between mental health and diet and exercise is complex. But research shows that, it's really important to have a good diet and to exercise for your mental health. It releases, feel-good hormones when you exercise. And when we've seen people that have got mental health problems in their recovery journey, we take them out to play football, for walks, to engage in sports, exercise activities. They do recover faster. They sustain recovery for longer because they're engaged in something that helps them, makes them feel good. And it doesn't have to be an expensive gym membership. Being in an open space, we've got lots of beautiful parks in Brent, people going out for a long walk. We've got walking groups that start somewhere not far from here. I think Rohan's a part of the park walks. He usually tells me about either Gladstone Park or Roundwood Park, walking around those. It opens your mind. Being in nature, being around water is also really pretty good for the mind. But in London, in urbanized communities like this, there's traffic, there's unclean air. All of these things also are not good for both our physical and mental health. So going somewhere slightly greener, being around nature is really good for people's mental health as well. So you don't have to pay for expensive gym memberships. However, sometimes when people do have complex mental health problems, they can also be prescribed some exercise programs by their GP. So they can have a consultation, and then our local gyms and sports centers support that initiative for people to go and exercise as part of their treatment as well. So I've got some resources, some numbers that you can call for both adults and for young people. So I will share that, and we'll have some things stack up on the walls for you guys to follow. Any questions?
Okay, I was saying, not focusing more on maybe an observation or feeling, is that the measures that are available in terms of preventative for people that may be going through worry or anxiety. Those measures that you mentioned, I think they're achievable. Before you get to that place, or when you're near that place.
Yeah.
I think once you've gotten to that place, your mind is not in that rational. You haven't got that rational sense of thinking.
Yeah.
I think it's a whole different ballgame when you're already there.
Yeah.
So again, even something like exercise, you need the accessibility of all the things that are available to help you. You need, I think, you just need more support and sort of agency in order for you to, the assistant agency
Yeah.
is different. And I don't think that sometimes it comes through from professionals. They get it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I absolutely hear you. And it's also about us professionals knowing what those resources and those things are in place in order for us to offer it to our patients once they've got to us. But as you said, it starts much earlier than before you've even gone to your GP to go and seek that help. So if you can already build those things in life, like diet and exercise and relaxation and, having that space to find a supportive environment, social networks, then like I said, it might not have to get to that point, but it's being that aware, that actually these are some, like I said, identifying what your sources of stress are and then tackling them early on. Yeah, and you say that if you've got to that point now, you're not in the right mindset to be able to do it, but you have to have hope that you can get out of that terrible place. Because if you don't, then it's a definite, downward spiral. And usually people who have faith, who have other people, fare a lot better than those who don't, because they are hopeful. They can see that I'm here. Yes, it's a terrible place, but I can get out of here, and this is what I can do to help me get out of here. Yeah, but I hear you. I've heard people say, when I've been with a professional, they've not been as compassionate as they could be. They haven't really listened to me. They've dismissed me. They haven't been as supportive as they could be. So I do hear you, and that's why we train people more and more these days. Even I've just been on a course that I'm coming to the end of, a 1-year course about how me as a leader, I can be more compassionate to my team. That's in order for my team to be compassionate to the people that they encounter. So some things we have to learn. Some people are born with that kind of heart and that kind of disposition, and some people need to learn it. And some people need to be held to account when they don't treat people right. Because when a person comes to you in that state, it's already very difficult to seek help, as it is. If someone's plucked up the courage to come and seek help, then you've got to hear them out, and you've got to be compassionate, and you've got to get them the right support. Because really, as a practitioner, my goal is to get you better, to get you back to where you were or near enough when you were really thriving. Because a person who is thriving is a person who contributes to their community, to society. Because the burden of mental health on the economy is quite high. Because serious mental health problems can be very debilitating. When we think about treatment and accommodation and all of those things, and treating other things like addiction that might come with it, it's a high burden. Yes, sir.
When we just begin to speak, we speak about inequality,
Yeah.
deprivation, and poor housing.
Yeah.
Local job and things like that. Isn't that supposed to address from a governmental level?
Yes, that's what you would think. There was funding that should be coming from central government into the local authorities for them to provide those things. And I think there is funding that is usually allocated, but is it sufficient? The NHS, for instance, is very under-resourced. Mental health is underfunded compared to other conditions and so on. And then, so you might see people on the street who, as you said, look like they have mental health difficulties, because we don't have funding to give them optimum help as we could, and sometimes we have to rely on voluntary sector support to help us they're not a replacement for what we should do as statutory services, but sometimes we don't have sufficient resources. And when you talk about inequality, people in Westminster, Kensington, South Chelsea, or Harrow, or Camden, who are on the borders of us, have more money, have more resources. I hear my colleagues in those areas that work with people say, I've got so many places to send people to. There's still a drop-in centre open. There's still this open. They're able to go and do that. We don't have some of those in Brent anymore. When I was a student 20 years ago, I was going with my mentors to different day centres and places like that where patients will go to. Even if they were in hospital, they'll go out for day leave and they'll go into art somewhere. They could go and dance somewhere and come back. A lot of those closed because the funding's ended. So that is an inequality itself, and we are starting to look at identify those again and say we need to close this gap. This was working for people before. This is what was helping. Even youth clubs, people say, there were youth clubs that were open where young people can go to, so they don't have to hang around outside kind of aimlessly with nothing to do. In this church, you guys have a brilliant program with the Pathfinders. You can keep your youth engaged in doing something meaningful and practical, that can prepare them for life. Not every place has that. And then that's why young people need to do something. They've got a lot of energy. We can't really blame them when they're out on the street corners messing about, because they've got nothing to structure them. Yeah.
Yes, so to go back to your introduction, don't you think that the fear, the propaganda led to people having those anxiety and worries and fear. Perhaps that if he had not been, people would have led more normal life. It was difficult to escape, the fear that was out there because you would hear it every day, number of dead, number of alive. You would hear it, you would see it on the underground, the shops, the street, everywhere. You couldn't go to bed without hearing it. So I think this has contributed to people feeling anxious and depressed, and without it, I think we would have lived normal lives. There's also, I was reading during the week in the Metro newspapers that 2.5 million people are suffering to work or for cause of illness. They are out of work. And the majority of them are young people because they are suffering from mental depression.
Yeah.
See all this.
Yeah. I absolutely hear you, but if you think about it, we've been through something very unprecedented, something that I don't think you and I thought was going to. I never thought 10 years ago that we would have had a pandemic. It never crossed my mind that the world was going to go through something like this, that our children were going to be in lockdown for such a long time. Or that, as you said, a lot of information, misinformation, we were getting an overload of information. It was finding a balance to inform people, because people do need to know things, but, how much information is too much, and how much you can cope with is different from what I can cope with. And knowing, some people have been able to. I'm one of those people who have turned my TV off because it was too much. I had family members who died at the height, at the beginning of COVID. I had colleagues who died. It was a very distressing time for me, and yet I still had to go out and work. I was one of those people, as a key worker, still needed to be out there. I was at risk of being one of those people who would have contracted COVID and died. And actually, I did contract it at the beginning, but I was lucky. It wasn't as serious as my other colleagues. I thought I had a really bad cold. I didn't know, but when we did a test 3 months later, it showed, my plasma level showed that I had COVID in March, and 3 months later we did the test. So social media has a lot to answer for. There is now way too much information. If you go on YouTube, as you say, some of the things that you see on YouTube is no wonder that people are stressed and worried and anxious. There are so many things that will make your hair stand on end if you get sucked into it. It's about the person, how they can cope, how they can avoid, how they can protect themselves. I get myself out WhatsApp groups and things like that when people are sharing things that I know is misinformation to begin with, things that I know is not going to be good for my mind. It's going to affect me. I'm going to worry about it. I'm going to ruminate about it too much. I remove myself from that WhatsApp group, or I block these people. And I tell people in my circles, don't send me such messages. It's not good for me. Or they send you images of people in really, very, very explicit things. And I said, I don't want that. I don't need to know. That's how I protect my mind. Not everybody has the ability to be able to say that or to get out of that. And they can get taken in by those. And it's detrimental to them, definitely. But yes, young people are much more affected by those, because I believe, anecdotally, that young people haven't had the opportunity in the disruption that they've had in their life to build some of that resilience that they needed to do in order to be able to cope with life. Life is tough. Life was tough. It's tougher now. And if our young people are not as resilient, they will struggle to cope with that. There's peer pressure. There's social media. There's how people think about their body image. All of those things are really, really affecting young people. And I feel quite sorry for them, because I think they're in a bad place. But they need strong people around them to guide and support them. And I was even talking to my son this morning. He's 13. And a few days ago, he came to me. He forgot to do some work. And he came and said, Mum, can you phone in sick for me? I was like, why? He said, well, he was honest, I didn't do my homework and I'm going to get into trouble. He literally jumped out of bed at 6:30 and he was mortified when he came. He was, shaking. And I said to him, no, I'm sorry, I'm not going to write you a note. What you're going to do is you're going to sit down and you're going to do it now. And what I can do is I can write a note to say that you're a little bit late to school if that happens, but I'm not going to call the school or write you a note to say you're sick because you're not sick. That would be me lying for you. And if I lie for you today, you expect me to lie for you again and again and again. So I said, we're not going to do that. So we sat down, we looked at his homework. He did it within the hour. And he felt proud of himself, And I called him in earlier on and I was reading something. And he said the decisions young people make at the age of 12, 13, 14 can show the level of resilience that they're going to build to cope with life later on. And I said to him, look at that, this is a prime example. What did you do the other day? You faced it head on, and you did well. And you were happy with yourself, you were proud of yourself, weren't you? And he said, yes, thank you, Mom. Yeah, it is. Yeah, but it's having that. If a child doesn't have that, a person to do that for them, to give them the pep talk, to make them feel that, they can achieve something, then, they're going to get sucked into the wrong place. Because there are people out there who will also take young people into the wrong path. It has been known, there are gangs, there are, these chicken shop recruitments and things like that. I'll go and buy you a chicken meal for £3 a day, and next week I'll ask you to give me back £20. You're a 13-year-old, you don't have £20. You're not going to be able to pay me back. That's how you get sucked into the wrong place. Any more questions or reflections, observations? No? All right. Well, sorry, I can't hear you. 1 in 4 people, yeah. Absolutely. Thank you for that. And this is why pastors asked me to come and talk to you guys today, especially, this week, as I said, Mental Health Awareness Week. We are raising awareness. They chose the theme of anxiety because of this is what's happened over the past 3 years and how the level of anxiety has increased. But I think more and more, because faith communities are seeing, people are coming to you, so people are beginning to speak, because celebrities have spoken about their struggles with mental health as well, and people are beginning to say, okay, well, if Prince Harry can talk about his mental health difficulties, maybe I too can talk about it, and maybe I can also get some help. But faith communities are also being more receptive and thinking more openly about it, because as I said, 1 in 4, that is a lot of people, and a lot of people are suffering in silence because they can't open up to people that are supposed to love them and trust them and support them. I'm your sister, you're my brother, and so on. But if I've got mental health difficulty, you don't support me as much as you see. And it's not because people don't want to. As you said, sometimes people just don't know enough about it. Yeah. So if we can help in any way, and I said to Pastor Mary, if it's like you just want to talk a particular topic, like anxiety, like depression, maybe want to talk about schizophrenia, the prevalence of it, that sort of thing, because it is very prevalent. More serious mental health difficulties are very prevalent within Brent and schizophrenia. We know that black men are 5 times more likely to be diagnosed with schizophrenia than their white counterparts. What impact is that having in our homes, in our communities, in our society? That means 5 black men as opposed to 1 white man is not in work because it's really a very debilitating illness, really struggling to be able to look after himself, to support his family, to do those things that makes a community strong. Yeah, so we need to really begin to see that and want to do something about it. Yes.
So research.
Sorry, the lady's got a question.
Research, Jenny, on this, because this has been the same for a while, this fight to white.
This is much more recent. There was a report in 2019, actually. It's a more, the race equality report. Yeah, it's from there. And even we see that within Brent itself, which is, obviously a large area. Black people are not the highest demographic. We're not the highest population in Brent. But when it comes to being placed under a section of the Mental Health Act, black men are more likely to come in that way, more likely to be brought in by the police or by the criminal justice route or something like that. So it's also around, again, inequalities, again, discrimination, and other factors that feed into this. So it might even start sometimes like from school, and this is why we need to act from early on. And as a person with a young son, I have a vested interest to make sure that I intervene early, I educate my community, I support the schools, I support people to look after our young people so that their mental health is protected. I'm not saying that they're never going to develop a mental health problem, because it can happen. But what can we do to prepare and be resilient if that were to happen, that it doesn't catch us off guard, or that we don't repeat the same things that have been happening over the years?
So I was a little late in, so I guess you did sort of signs, and when you look at our sort of congregation,
Yeah.
we sit beside maybe the same people every Sunday, and so we can be a little bit closed off. So how do they kind of look for signs in everybody?
Yeah.
How do we support? Because quite often, I think,
Yeah.
we miss the signs.
Yeah.
And then suddenly somebody goes missing for 3 weeks, and
Yeah.
suddenly everybody says, oh,
Yeah.
Mommy's not here. Oh, I think she's gone to Jamaica,
Yeah.
Nobody knows that I'm
Yeah.
actually at home in my house because they
Yeah.
just haven't seen me.
Yeah.
How do we improve on that?
I think it's about knowing. It's knowing the person, isn't it? As you said, you sit next to the same people every week in, week out, so you must have a good idea of their pattern, and you will begin to see if something is different about them. Some people will hide it, as you said, they might just retreat because they themselves have noticed that something is going on, and they're worried, they're ashamed, they don't want other people to know, so they will just disengage for some time. But if you know somebody, you know their pattern, you'll know that that behavior is unusual for them to behave this way, and you will be a bit worried about them. And as I said, be open, just be curious about that person, ask them, what's going on? Is there anything I can do to help? And usually, sometimes people, they will say, no thank you, I don't have anything. No, I don't need your help at first. But don't give up, just gently keep on, be a friend, be a sister, be that person, and just keep noticing and ask them, and eventually they will, tell you. Yes.
I would say this, that Molly, that maybe if, as a family of God, if genuine care, they feel that there's genuine support, they themselves might be shocked that they are opening up to someone that they didn't think they would. You know, for some people it just goes. You just find naturally that they will want to. So I think it's for us to develop.
It's to create that condition.
Listen,
It's to create that
we
condition.
smile a lot. We
Yeah.
smile a lot. We're getting on with what we're getting on with.
Yeah.
But really,
Inside, deep inside, you don't know.
it's like lip service, if you know what I mean. We need to be a bit deeper, and as I say, it comes from everyone being more engaging with one
More
another.
engaged, be curious. I think, as I said, curious is a really important thing. Sometimes people think you're nosy. I'm a nosy person, you know, but I'm curious. I'm interested in people. I want to know what's going on with you know, and I want to be able to help you if I can, and I'd like you to be able to help me if you can. It's reciprocal. It's not one-sided, but getting to know. So, like I said, if I know you and something is a little bit off, then I can tell. Okay,
And
you know,
it's that relationship, isn't it?
it's to build that relationship.
It's that relationship. Because if I know
Yeah.
how
You're not just
how
going
I
to get
am,
from someone who you just know.
Yeah.
I know how. If someone says to me, "How are you?" they're going to get, "Oh, fine."
Yeah.
If someone says, "Oh,"
No,
I
this
noticed.
is
Okay, let's just say for argument's sake, I noticed you've got silence today as much as you normally find.
Yeah.
And then someone tripped, they actually know me, they actually recognise that.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
And they're interested in you.
Exactly, they're interested,
Yeah.
and they acknowledge, they know me. It's not just, they hit the nail on the head. They actually recognise, they know me for who I am, and that it will invoke that natural willingness to open up. So I just want to say to people, have that deeper relationship with one another. In terms of helping one another. I mean, this is our greatest sort of richest resource, is us.
Absolutely. And I always say that when people tell me that the surrounding boroughs have more resources, and I say rent resources, it's people. Yeah? Because if we then think about COVID, people came together to do what they can, like all the mutual aid groups, food banks are open, that they wanted to do something, people wanted to help each other. But to say, you know, if I create that condition, if you see that I'm genuine and you can trust me, you can open up to me. If, as you said, I'm just being superficial, you know, I'm just being lazy, you're not going to want to tell me because, you know, you have to trust me. Are you going to, you know, breach confidentiality? I'm not going to tell you something and you're going to go and tell a sister what I told you. So I have to have the confidence in you that if I share something with you, it's a safe space, it's between us, you're creating this condition for me and you're not going to, you know, breach my trust, then I'm more likely to tell you something. But if that's not the case, then I won't. You know. Yes.
In response to you, Audrey, I think for me, I've grown up here as a child to my age now. So I think it's been somewhat adjusting to what you've just suggested. Because you may not know who you can go to in your current state because they know you as a child and they may see you still as a child, not that you're now moved into life and that you've had issues at work and you come to church for church to be your safe space. And then it's not because now you're not sure who you can go to because are you likely to go and tell my parents what I just told you because you know them or what I'm going to say to you is going to stay with you. Sometimes we come to church and we put a facade up because that's what we practice. And sometimes you're scared to come to church because you might have that one person that will know straight away that something's wrong, but you're not ready to discuss it or deal with it or seeing that you're falling into a stigma bracket. So you've got those areas to that we need to necessarily look at or adjust or tread carefully. Because sometimes, are you okay? For years, I would say, if someone says to me, how are you? I'm fine. Because I don't know how to physically push out what's going on. You know? But say, for instance, if Artimani was saying to me, Teresa, how are you? I know I can't hide it because she spent time to get to know me as Teresa, not Sister Fusie's child. Do you see what I mean? So it's not always easy for someone that's necessarily grown up in church trying to adjust where they are
Yeah,
in their
absolutely.
life stages.
Absolutely. And, I find that as well. Sometimes, as I said, I might think that actually we're from the same community, the same church, and that person's the best person to talk to. And people tell me, no, I don't want to see, a worker from my community. I don't want to see someone who's there. Because if you said, you don't know whether you can trust them or not, whether they're going to go and share that with somebody else. Sometimes even as an adult, but as you said, you've grown up, they've seen you, they still see you as the child or the young person. So they might feel that they can go and discuss it with you because they're worried about you anyway. I mean, in my family, they still call me the child. There's people that are older than me. When they're speaking in our language, they refer to me as the child, and my children will laugh. And I said, don't worry, that's going to happen to you too. Yeah. So it's about finding the balance. But I'm sure in a big place like this, you will still be able to find one person who you can confide in and, who can support you, and then maybe even, find somebody else who can maybe do that if they're not able to. Yes, sir.
I heard you say that often people say lose trust. You reveal something to brother or sister or friend, and they go back. I personally don't believe much in that you shouldn't reveal. When I look through the scripture and as God-fearing people and on situation, although you may not like it, to help you, I have to reveal it to someone because I may not be in the position to help you, but I know someone who can, and because I should ask you. Saturday night, someone called me from Canada
Yeah.
and said, I want to share something with you. And I said, you sure you want to share with me? Because you're telling me, don't sit back to the person. Right? So he said to me, I believe this person getting mental. And do you recognize I'm going to talk to the person? I said, no. But the person related to me. But said, don't say anything. I said, stop. Because you're knowing this, and the person related to me, and you are telling me, don't say anything. It don't make sense to tell me. Because things like this, I'm have to say something or say to someone who in that field can relate to them. So many times you want to share things, and I say, don't share it with me. Right?
Well, that's good. That's good. But you just kind of just said what I was just saying to the lady earlier, is that, people might feel that they need to override you if you share with them because they, as you said, you feel that you might not be the best person to help them, but you want to find someone else to help them. But what you need is to respect them. And as you said, from the get-go, you say to them, if you tell me this, I don't think I can keep it to myself. Then it's up to them if they still choose to tell you. Yeah, because they know that's not going to stay with you. And myself, as a professional, when I'm doing assessments, I will say to people, what you tell me, so when the police say, whatever you say will be given in evidence. Whatever you say to me, I can keep it confidential. However, if there is a risk to yourself or a risk to somebody else, I cannot keep that to myself. I have to breach confidentiality in that case. And people might choose not to tell me. Because if you tell me you're going to kill someone, I'm not going to keep that to myself. Yeah? Because that's going to be a danger to that person. If you tell me you're going to kill yourself, I'm also not going to keep that to myself. Because I know that it's now got to that point where I cannot contain it myself. In order to prevent you killing someone or you killing yourself, if I can, I will breach confidentiality. Because safety is paramount in this instance. However, if it's simply because I would say to you, that person's got mental health problems, I don't expect you to share that with everybody. Because that is something very personal. Or did you know that person went out that last weekend and did this, that, and the other? What is the value in you sharing that with somebody else and breaching that confidentiality? Because in as much as you say that you're being honest, and they say honesty is the best policy, sometimes you have to use your wise mind. What's really going to happen after I share this? Is it going to be beneficial? Or is it going to make things worse? And is that person going to trust me ever again? So if they're in a difficult situation to come to me, or will they say that actually the last time I told you something you told, so I can't share things with you anymore? Yeah.
How do you discover when someone, you may look at me and say, why there's no there?
yourself about
Then
yeah.
this organization were on my back, right? And
Yeah.
said, oh, you need to pay this money now. And I said to them on the phone, look, you think I'm going to give myself to pay you now? You got to wait.
Yeah.
So from I use the word, I'm going to kill myself now. So I began fight and I called the police. I was in the back. And lo and behold, they said, where are you? I said, I'm in the office. And they find me in the office, and the police came and said, oh, are you all right? You know, they're concerned that you may kill yourself. I said, tell them to get off my back. And I'm wait. I'm not mental.
Yeah.
Because they start to assess me that it must be mental. How do you evaluate people?
Well, that person clearly doesn't know you very well, because if they know you very well, they would know that that's a figure of speech. So, in fact, they should be worried about the fact that you said you weren't going to pay them their money back, rather than, because you clearly said, I'm not going to kill myself in order to pay you. So if that person knew you, they would have realized that, that was not what you were meaning to say.
Well, I guess it's to remember there's probably a set of questions if you think that person does seem right to you.
Yeah.
There are a set of questions.
Yeah, there are some questions. There's some what we call early warning signs and so on. And usually, people who are going to recognize early warning signs, either the person themselves, if they're able to do that, or the people closest to them. Because sometimes I might not recognize that I'm in that state, because this is why we say sometimes people have lost insight, or the sister was saying you're not in the right place to be able to see that. But your sister, your mom, your dad, they will see that this is not how Jenny usually is. I can see something is different. And if they know that I've got, depression or something like that, they'll say, well, she's more withdrawn, she's not getting out of bed, she's not, because depression can even stop you from doing a simple thing like brushing your teeth. They're not taking care of her, maybe there's point, say she's not taking care of her hair, she's not wearing any makeup, this kind of thing, she's not as focused as she usually is, she's not enjoying her TV program, she's not interacting with people the way she used to. So those are what we call early warning signs, and there will be different ones for different people. But if people know you well, those will be what it is. And normally when people are better, we then actually do that plan with them to tell us, how will people know you're not so well, that you're in a bad place? How will your family, so we get that person to identify. If I don't wash for a few days, it means this is happening. And I used to have a patient who said to me, when I start to believe those ideas, those outlandish ideas that I have, like maybe, I have special powers, or MI5 are after me, when I believe that they're real, then I have problems. But if I just talk about them, generally, it's okay.
But you're a professional,
Yeah.
and we're not. So I'm sitting next to Florence, and I actually kind of shout, because we kind of sit in that combination. And I think, Florence, you should seem okay to you. Charlotte know the signs. We haven't had that conversation with Florence
we are brothers and sisters and we care about each other's welfare, you would take time out to call me, even if we have difference of opinion or whatever it is. If you care about my welfare, I would not be calling 6 people to get your number as a brother or sister. I should be able to take up my book. This is Brother Peter. Brother Peter, I'm a senior. How are you? Is things going? He may not be responding to me. I may say, Brother Tom, call Brother Peter. He not respond to me in certain way. So people begin to concern more there. So I believe if we have like genuineness about each other, we share number. It's not like at home when you didn't have phone, you could just run up the road and go and check on me. Everybody have phone here. But some people just want to be at church, you see me, that's it, nothing else. And many times we say, when you see people talking on their phone, we say, boy, that's the sign now. So we cheer for it. So I'm saying to myself, how do I identify that person? Because many times just kind of talking, and you wonder, is it mine? And then you say, why can't I? That's what I did ask me, you can just talk to yourself in a way. And I believe many times those are signs,
better equipped, even though, yes, we do fail in certain areas, but compared to, let's say, councils or some groups like yourself, would you say that churches would be better equipped because we have faith, we are connected, we know who we are as with regard to God who created us. Would you say that we are better equipped to offer support to those who may have mental health, even within ourselves, in the community?
No, I wouldn't say you're better equipped. I think we complement each other. I think we all have our roles. I think there are definitely times where a person might need you and not need me, and vice versa. There will be a time where a person is no longer completely unwell, is on their recovery journey, and they'll need you and not need me.
Okay, so would you say now, perhaps you may have seen it, with statistics, I think do speak for themselves. Would you say that you have less people who have mental health in churches because they have that connection with God? They offload, they pray, so therefore they speak to Jesus, and therefore, the burden is less. That people who don't speak to nobody, they don't know how to offload their worries and anxiety and stress. When you have no connection to nobody, no God, no nothing.
No, I wouldn't say that. I would
No?
say that mental health problems is prevalent absolutely everywhere. Some places just have better support in place to be able to do it, or as you said, you have your faith, you have your networks, so you're contained better, you have hope around that, and people who do fare better in terms of their recovery are people who have something in place. And even like when we're discharging people, we have something called an aftercare plan of how people can be looked after. But I wouldn't say that there is less mental illness in churches because of your faith. I'd say perhaps people don't disclose it quite so much, or people actually use your faith and prayer and so on as a way of coping with your mental health. Yes, Sister Marley. Sister Marley, got to have it.
You started going down the road that I was going to go down. In that in church, I think it's more hidden.
Yeah.
I think there's more judgment.
Yes.
People think they should be in a place where they're not and be critical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think for those who live even here,
Yeah.
where people are really suffering and people are really hurt by some of the stuff that's going on.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think that's where it gets lost
Yeah.
within the prayer, within the you should have faith, I should have faith.
Yeah.
No, there's this judgment that's just painful.
Yeah.
So I don't think it's a case of, it's 50% here and 60% there.
No, not at all.
Or more this and way more that. I don't think
Yeah.
it's that. I just think there's a broad umbrella where
Yeah.
people fall through cracks simply because you have that expectation. Yeah, but don't you talk to God?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
God have the
Are you
answer?
doing something wrong?
Give
Are you not
the
praying
word.
properly? Yeah.
Are you praying?
And it's not just in our faith.
Why don't you have faith?
In other faiths, and this happens in other faith communities as
So
well.
where do we
you
get
know.
that from? Where
Yeah.
do we get that from?
We get that from because we're people, human nature. We don't. It happens. We can't help ourselves.
There is a ladder that we're expected to be on.
Yeah.
And it's unwritten. So it's not fully conscious. So I've been in the church 5 years.
end of the day, what is the bigger picture? We want to help. And if we are judging people, they're not going to come to us for that help. So we have to show that openness. We have to change ourselves as well. We might not agree with how a person does something, but that doesn't mean a person is less valuable because they do things differently from us. Or because they do things like, I recently held a focus group and I had 4 young women, and 3 friends were Diana, and 1 friend, because she wasn't addressing her problems in the way how they would do it. Now there was cultural difference in that as well. This girl was Eastern European but being raised here, and the other girls were African or Caribbean background, so they were raised very differently. For instance, things like, your mom's good to you, I can't believe you talk to your mom like that. The Eastern European girl didn't really care whether she talked to her mom like that or not, because it's not in her culture to treat her mom the way how we might treat our mom. Even if we disagree with our moms, we still are not going to walk away from them and all of that. So these girls were judging her for how she does that, and about how her relationship, how she handles her intimate relationships, how she uses alcohol, and it wasn't helpful because they were being judgmental. They are her friends, they want to help her, and they're worried about the situation she's dealing with domestic abuse and substance use and relationship problems with her mom. They want to help her resolve that, but they were going about it the wrong way because they were going about it from their own point of view, how they would deal with it if it was their own personal way of doing it, how they would have already walked away from this man, and so on and so on. But she's not in the same space as you. She's not able to do it in that way. What can you do? You can be a friend and just listen and just support her to get there. And it might take a long time because she's doing it her own pace. She has to come to terms with herself first that this relationship is a dead end. It's not going to get me anywhere. Usually, you're out of the situation and say, you're out of the box. You can see clearly. She's in there. She can't see it yet. But with you being there and supporting her rather than also attacking her, because that person who's doing these things to her doesn't mean her well. You mean her well, but you're doing similar things. You're also judging her. You're also, having a go at her. She doesn't feel good, so she's going to go and smoke again. She's going to go and drink again. Yeah, because the stress is coming from all corners. Where she thought she can go and get support from her mom's judging her. Her friends are judging her. The alcohol isn't. The weed isn't. So she'll go there. So until you stop judging and be a friend and be a source of support, that will continue. And it's hard to do because some things that our friends do doesn't sit well with us. But we're just meant to be friends and helpers and help them find their own way. And that's why sometimes you need a facilitator, you need somebody to be involved from the outside to kind of say, okay, yeah, I'm here in both parts, but maybe this is how we should go. Well, anxiety is a diagnosable problem, a mental health problem. It is because mental health is your physical, your emotional, your psychological well-being. So all of those things that affects your thinking, your mood, your behavior, that is a part of mental health.
So that's all of us.
Well, this is it. There's no health without mental health. So we all need to have good mental health. You're going to help each other. We're going to help each other. You know why we're going to help each other? Because we're going to talk about this. Because we're not going to suffer in silence by ourselves. Yeah? And we're not going to have any stigma around. We're going to make it a normal thing. I am stressed. I'm worried. My bills are bothering me. My relationship is struggling. I'm not going to be ashamed to be able to tell you that I don't have a perfect marriage, because there's no such thing. they can still have a diagnosis of schizophrenia, for instance, and go about their life because it's being managed, they're being okay with it. But actually, if there is a deterioration, what is that level of deterioration? What impact is it having on that person, their family members, and the wider society? Yeah, so it's the degree of that situation.
But if I stigmatize against you, I have grades of mental health. Because that's supposed to be rescuing you, right? As opposed to restoring you.
Yeah, but don't put too much pressure on yourself either. You know, we're not experts. Just
I'm
because
just trying
you...
to understand what this mental health is all about. The mind is not balanced, right?
Yeah, there might be an imbalance. And as I said, you know, we all have mental health, but it is the degree of it, and it's our level of coping, resilience, our coping strategies. What do I have in place to help me deal with this? If, you know, something is happening to me, do I see it? Do I really catastrophize it? Is it the end of the world? Or do I have hope about it? And I'm able to do something about it? I think this is a longer conversation. Welcome, Sister Marie. But we can, but this is it. We have to come from a position of ability, yes, rather than inability. Okay? That's where we stand. We have the ability to do something, to help something, to help each other, to help ourselves. I might have this, but I can still do something. So I will disclose about myself. I have a serious back problem. 5-6 years now. I slept with this in my back. Okay? That's a very debilitating condition. If I don't take medication, I can't stand here in front of you. I can't work. But since 2018, I haven't really taken up any sick days because I have the ability to manage that condition that I have. I talk to my doctor if it's getting worse. You know, I do the exercises that I've been told to do. It's so debilitating up to stay in bed. Back pain is one of the most chronic conditions that people have. A lot of people have it, and it prevents people from functioning. Yeah. However, I've decided that I have the ability to manage this, and I get up and I go out and I walk and I do my aerobics and I do the exercise that my physical therapist told me, and he said to me, rest is not best. You gotta move on and do something. Yeah. So, but if I lost hope, if I said I'm a young woman, I've broken my back now. Thankfully, I've had all my 4 children. But there's nothing for me now. I can't do anything now. I'd be one of those people laid up in bed with depression. Totally unable to do anything, unable to contribute to my society, unable to support my family, I'm unable to see my children flourish and do what they need to do. But I get up and I move.
I haven't seen such a polite and patient presenter. Yeah? She came here at 4:30, and now it's 6:30, and she's kindly still accepting our contributions, and your contributions are not ending. Thank you. Now there's just 2 things I want to do before, and the first one is during COVID, people were doing mighty things for people. You know, here at Wilsden, we were doing the lunch boxes and giving food in the community. But because that time I had to go back on the wards and, be part of the numbers, I felt like, when you hear people say, we've done this for COVID, we've done that, we've done this, I felt like I wasn't doing enough. Until one day I had like 4 patients in one of the bays. And at the end of my shift, these people were really sick. We were putting on them on CPAP, and they were hot, and I was putting towels and doing this just to keep them cool and all that stuff. And at the end of the shift, They said, thank you for today. And from that day, I thought, I am just as good as that person who's running around with lunch boxes and all that stuff. And what I want to say, Sister Jenny, is thank you for what you are doing. You know, sometimes when we do these things and we are in paid employment, we don't realize our vocation. Because today is a Saturday, you could have been in your house. But you found it worth to come and share. That is beyond sometimes what people are paid to do. You know, just people feeling that they've got something to share, something that they can, you know, share with others to change other people's lives. I liked it when she said, sometimes I meet my patients on the bus and say, hi, Nurse Jenny, I'm still taking my medication. That is beyond what the NHS pays you. That is something that is achieved by somebody who goes beyond when the salary stops. And I just want to thank you and say, like Esther, you are here for such a time as this, when the world has been changed by COVID and there is so many patients with mental health needs, and you are able to meet their needs. You need to count it as a blessing. And so we are blessed to have you. So before I go to my second thing that I want to talk about, I just want to pray for Sister Jenny so that God continues to bless her in this role that she is in. Yeah, let us pray. Almighty Heavenly Father, who art above, we come before you this afternoon. We come before you with grateful hearts, dear Heavenly Father, because you never leave us in darkness. You enlighten us all the time. And this afternoon, you've sent us your maid servant, dear Heavenly Father, just to share with us. And dear Heavenly Father, the thing with you is you always prepare us. And we are so grateful that you've prepared us today because you know where your people and where your church is going. And so you want us to be prepared to help your people if we recognize any of this in this church or wherever we are with our families, our friends in the workplaces. And so at this time, we just want to pause and say, dear Lord, we want to pray for Sister Jenny. That, dear Heavenly Father, as she continues to work in this vineyard, she realizes that she's not just working for the NHS, but she's working for the Most High God. A God who cares for the people beyond what the resources that the NHS can afford. A God who cares for people beyond what the government can afford. Where, dear Heavenly Father, whilst the government is trying its best or the NHS is trying its best, where you take over for your people from where we can't even reach out. So I just want to pray, dear Heavenly Father, that you continue to give her strength. You continue to give her the vision, dear Heavenly Father, because you have said in your word, where there is no vision, the people perish. But dear Heavenly Father, if you continue to give her that vision, she'll be able to go out there and meet the needs of the people, dear Heavenly Father, because each and every one of those people out there are your people. You have created them and you have loved them in your own image. And it pains you when their mental health is disturbed and they are not, functioning the way you want them to function. But that is why you've put people like Sister Jenny in the way, dear Heavenly Father, so that they can help. And now that she has come to share with us, may you also help us to help. So please, dear Heavenly Father, continue to bless him. And I know sometimes the work gets hectic and gets tiresome, and sometimes we want to give up or we want to move to the next organization. But dear Heavenly Father, keep her there until she has accomplished that which you want her to accomplish. And when she's ready to go to another sign, because you would have allocated that, you will make that possible. Thank you, dear Heavenly Father, for her life and for this time that she has come just to spend the time with Wilsden Church. I pray for her family. I pray for her teenage son. May you continue to bless him. Keep him from harm and danger. Protect him, dear Heavenly Father. I also pray for her back, dear Heavenly Father, that you continue to strengthen her and you continue to heal her so that she will continue to accomplish that you wanted to accomplish. I thank you and praise your name. And as she go forward, dear Heavenly Father, may you continue to bless her. For I pray in no other name but the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord and Savior. Amen. 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 So she will leave us the material, or she'll give to Pastor so that we can share and we can continue to have these sessions and recognize when our fellow men are in need. And at the beginning of the presentation, she talked about, being able to know what is happening to your other person. And you know what, when she was talking, I just thought, you know what, I think it's time for me to link with Sister Marlene and the Deaconess's team to be able to reach out to the people who are lonely out there. You know, we can do something, brothers and sisters, for people. Some people just need to talk. You know, we haven't seen some people in here for a very long time. Yeah? And as we have heard, our mental health starts working on us. Yeah? Until sometimes we can't cope with how it's working on us. And it just takes that one person to come and sit with us and talk to us. So, Auntie Marlene, I am coming so that I can reach out to anybody that I need to reach out to and make that difference. And there's a song that I always love. There's a change that is coming. But Lord, let that change start with me. Thank you, Sister Jenny. Thank you so much. May God bless you, saints. It was nice for you to stay for so long. Thank you. May God bless you. And may you have a wonderful week.
Thank you so much. Thank you. And just one more thing, everyone, before you go. I was contemplating whether I should say this or not, and it might be a dampener on the mood. But I just wanted to give you my condolences on the passing of Sister Penny Thompson, and just to let you know that, I share your pain and I mourn with you. And Sister Penny and I recently connected because previously she was the service manager for Brand Mental Health that I work for, and I was a student in the team, however many years ago, when she still worked for Brand Mental Health Services, and she was a fantastically inspirational and amazing, elegant lady. And then we remember that about her. We remember her strong faith. We remember her strong leadership and how she inspired some of us to be able to stand in front of you here. And a few months ago, when I started coming to this church and I found her here, I didn't know this was her church. And I saw this elegant lady over there, and I was doing something and I was suddenly distracted, and I said, I must just go and say hello and see if she remembers me. And she very vaguely remembered me, and I said, that's fine, because I was just a student at the time, and she was a senior manager. She managed, the entire Brent South Community Mental Health team, so she didn't have to remember me, to be honest. But it was just so good, and I felt that God brought me here to connect with her again. And in that time, I saw her on 3 occasions when I've been here, and she was so warm, so kind, and the warmest hugs, although, her hugs weren't as strong as previously. But I'm just grateful that I got the chance to reconnect with her again, and I know that you had a very important person within your midst, and she did great work in Brent Mental Health Services, and I just wanted you to know that, and just to send my condolences to her family and to her friends and you guys here. And so it's a very sad loss. Thank you.
See your beautiful face, yeah?
Thank you. How are you?
I'm all right.
It's good to see
go to
you.
a different church. Let's talk.
Oh, good. Hello.